At some point in your life, financial questions start to change. The focus shifts away from getting by and more toward whether the future feels stable, flexible, and intentional. Many professionals reach this point when they have a strong income and minimal debt, but still feel uncertain about what would happen if work, health, or priorities shifted. I know we're seeing that with layoffs right now for sure. Today's episode is going to look at financial control through this lens. We're discussing what people are building beyond their paycheck, how financial readiness affects career decisions, and what it means to prepare for change before it becomes urgent. Welcome, everyone. I'm Julia Toothacre, your strategic career consultant, and I am so glad that you are with us today. While the Control Your Career podcast is primarily focused on career development, sometimes we need to have conversations about topics that impact our career decisions. And today, we are talking finances. I am joined by financial expert Natalie Kime for a grounded, practical conversation aimed at professionals who want their money to support their next chapter. Natalie, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and have this conversation.
Yes, I am too. And I just have to say, Natalie and I have known each other for a number of years now. And I love that because I love having my friends on the podcast, especially when they have an expertise that is completely different from mine. Also, I love, even though we're internet friends, we have actually met in person, which is so unique these days, I think.
It is.
And that's because Natalie is originally from Utah, which is where I live now. And so when she comes back to visit family and friends, we usually try to get together when we can. So I'm so excited to have this conversation. And I would love for you to give an intro of who you are, your expertise, and what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Natalie Kime, as Julia said, and I am a financial professional is what I call myself. I coach people when it comes to their finances. I provide financial education, and I help them plan or create their financial GPS, which takes them from where they are today to where they want to be in the future, which is different for everyone, as it should be. My background is 20 years in corporate finance and accounting, and I loved what I did. I did not love the schedule come month end, quarter end, year end, budget time, all the things, right? And so I was at a point in my career, I was looking to take my time back, but I love finances. And so I really found my home in starting my business and becoming a financial professional where I can help people rather than corporations to build the kind of wealth and financial freedom that they want.
Yes, I love that. And I think that that also really sets the stage for this conversation today. So I want to be really clear with those who are listening or watching in. This is not going to be a budgeting conversation. This is not going to be like a financial basics conversation. This is really going to be for people who, you have a good income, your debt is very minimal, like you are really looking at that next level of what financial freedom looks like and what you need kind of for the rest of your year. So I want to be really clear about that because there are so many people that talk finances, especially as it relates to career, and it's usually around the budgeting and all of that. And we're going beyond that today. So I hope that that really sets the stage for anybody who's listening to kind of understand what we're about so that you don't get confused when we're not talking about whether or not you should keep Netflix. Okay.
Yeah.
That is where we're going. Okay. So along those lines, I know I've seen this with my clients, and this is kind of what prompted this conversation, which is my coaching clients, most of them, they make good money. They have minimal debt or have no debt, which always surprises me. It's just kind of an interesting thread that they all have that's the same. But they're in this space where they can probably manage for a while, like if they got laid off or if something happened. but they haven't necessarily had some of those bigger financial conversations. And I know you and I have had a lot of these conversations because we've had to be caretakers. I was a caretaker before my parents passed. You're a caretaker now. We've watched these economic shifts happen. I'm seeing people getting laid off and not being able to pay rent or mortgage. I mean, there are so many things that go on, but there are still people who make good money. They're in a good financial position. They are not struggling. Nothing feels on fire. They're not a caretaker, but they're kind of figuring out like what is next when it comes to finances. So what are you seeing right now with people who might look financially successful on paper,
Mm.
but maybe they don't feel financially successful, or there might be some holes in that narrative for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing to touch on there is that high earners are often cash flow rich, but option poor. And
Mm.
so let me give a little bit of an example. I like to use myself as an example because when I came into this industry, I started my business part-time 7 years ago. I retired myself 5 years ago to step into this world full time. And I can look back and see so many patterns in myself. And so first of all, let me say wherever you are today is exactly where you are today. Stop looking backwards and thinking shoulda, woulda, coulda, because you can't. Let's look
Mhm.
forward and think, what's the next best step, right? But what I mean by cash flow rich but option poor is we have the money that we need. Oftentimes we have more than our needs. And what that does is that makes us comfortable.
Mhm.
And so we don't think about this what if or that what if. And for people out there who haven't been caretakers like you and I, Julia, who haven't experienced maybe significant health issues, they haven't maybe had that thing happen, that catalyst to make them think beyond things are okay, right?
Mhm.
They're utilizing whatever retirement that their employer provides. They're maybe building even outside of that. They may have some stock accounts, they may have a Roth IRA. So they're thinking, my general funding for retirement is good. Sometimes we find they're actually not doing that. Again, that's the comfort piece. We don't
Right.
think about what we're going to need in the future because we don't have a lot we can't take care of right now financially. Right. So when you don't have need as something that you're thinking about on a daily basis, you often don't think long term about that need either, other than that basic retirement planning. Um, these people they're well paid, but they're also highly dependent on continuity. And what I mean by that is I've got this job, I get paid well, it's gonna be there, I'm good. As long as everything keeps going like it is, everything's gonna be great. But let's be
Mhm.
honest, life does not keep going like it is. At some point, there is going something's gonna happen that requires a shift, whether it's with children you still have at home, your kids getting ready to go to college and the expense of that, paying for weddings, elderly parents, your own health. Something's going to drop in your lap that you're absolutely unprepared for. And all of a sudden, you're going to panic. But
Yeah.
it really comes from I made great money. I was an executive when I retired. I made well into the six figures. And I'll be honest, I spent because I could. And more importantly than all of that is the lack of financial education.
Mm.
That I
Mhm.
I think it's really easy for people to think, "Oh, it makes sense why young professionals might be struggling financially. They didn't get that financial education." But I have this great career. I make well into the six figures. I've got a healthy savings account. I've got a healthy 401k. But without that lack of education, and it's not an in-depth education, but it is thorough.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. And when you have that understanding, your financial education pushes you to think about the things in the future that you don't need right now, that aren't concerns right now. You're planning for everything, but in a way that if those things don't happen, you're just, you have greater benefit than you thought. But if those things do happen, you're not basically bankrupting your retirement to cover those costs.
Yeah.
It's both things. It's the and. And that's where financial education for people who are financially well off is still really important.
Yeah. Okay, I wanna dig into this a little bit more because I think what I'm hearing you say is the income part is good,
Mhm.
but the strategy part is not as good.
Yeah.
Because of the lack of education and understanding what's beyond. Because I think so many of us were taught, get a well-paying job, pay your bills, pay into your 401k, and everything will work out fine, right?
Yep.
But these days, any of us that have done any level of financial planning, that's not quite it.
Right.
There's so much more involved with that, and I think so many of us don't know when to have those conversations or how to have those conversations. So is there a tipping point for a professional where the income isn't the problem, right? They've got the income, they're secure. They maybe are spending a little more than they need to be, and then they need to start working on the strategy. Like the strategy is their actual problem moving forward. Is there like a tipping point there or a point that they need to be aware of?
So tipping point, kind of like a thing that happens or a time frame that would typically fall into?
Oh, either.
Okay.
Either.
So
Yeah.
short and simple answer is both. Right?
As it
Because
is.
for some people, it is a life change.
Mhm.
Going through a divorce, battling a health issue, the loss of a loved one, a spouse, a child, something like that. So oftentimes there is an occurrence that is your tipping point that makes you think, okay, let's talk about COVID. COVID was a tipping point for in ways for almost everybody. And what I mean by that is the COVID 2020, March of 2020, I was full time in my business. By October of 2020, I'd made the decision and put together a 6-month plan to retire myself, which happened in spring of 2021. All of a sudden, when people were passing away who had been perfectly healthy,
Mhm.
they got COVID and they went into the hospital and they never came home. A lot of those people were young. They weren't at the point yet where they thought, hey, life insurance is probably something I should have outside of work, right? A lot of people, your job pays 1 year or 2 years your annual salary. But
Mhm.
people who had children, who had a mortgage to pay, who lost a spouse, who, especially if they were the primary breadwinner or the only breadwinner, all of a sudden this thing has happened, right? That's the catalyst for change. People were getting life insurance hand over fist, which is amazing for me. And I don't mean in the sense of income, I mean in the sense of knowing that I could protect families so that if that ever happened, they weren't stuck. They weren't
Mhm.
struggling. They didn't have to sell the family home. They didn't have to go back to work a month after their spouse passed away. They didn't have to hire people or even become more financially strapped because they couldn't hire people to come in and fill in those gaps. Okay. So
Mhm.
COVID is a great example of that. The other side of that is, though, um, a layoff,
Yeah.
or even like me. I was 46 years old when I looked back and said, I've had an amazing career. I loved the work I did. I was blessed to work for amazing companies and be in great communities and cultures throughout my career, but I wanted my time back.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
sometimes it's just waking up one day and realizing, man, I have put in the work. I have enjoyed what I do, but I want more freedom.
Mhm.
And time freedom, time is money. So that financial freedom you have impacts your ability to have that time freedom and make shifts and changes. And for me, it was starting my own business to get those
Mhm.
things back. But inside of all of that, it's fragile systems. When you don't have to worry that the bill isn't going to clear when it hits your bank account because you have extra, to the thousands and
Mhm.
savings and this and that, you're able to vacation every year, you likely have fragile systems, meaning you
Right.
probably don't budget. And if you do, it's a very basic budget. It's also being overconfident in your income,
That's
right?
very real.
It's always going to be there. I'm worth this
Yeah.
number. Okay, well, we have all seen shifts in the landscape
Mhm.
of corporate America. We've seen shifts in income, right? And there was a time I was pretty confident in my income, but at the same time, I was working a lot of hours. So while I made good money on paper, the truth was I was making less money per hour the
Mhm.
further I moved up the ladder because I had more responsibilities that didn't fit inside a 40-hour box.
Right.
Okay. And so
Right.
sometimes that can cause, hey, I need extended daycare for children, or I need this coverage or that coverage or the other, or I'm just your own health. You're logging back on at 10
Mhm.
o'clock at night when the kids go to bed and spending 3 hours working. So it can fall into a lot of things, but fragile systems, not tracking your money, not knowing where it's going, not knowing what could come down the line because you haven't faced it yet,
Yeah.
overconfidence in your income, and then underpreparedness for disruption.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this, and I'm not even going to try to take the harsh edges off of it because I hope people hear this for what it is. If the only place you're saving for retirement is your 401k, you're making one of the biggest mistakes of your life. A
I agree.
401k is not enough. And if you want to know about more about that, go research. And I cannot think his name on the top of my head. The guy who created the 401k. It was created to accompany a pension. What happened
Mhm.
is corporations saw, hey, we can do away with the pension, we can give a match to our employees, and we can save millions and billions of dollars over decades, right?
Right.
And so we put into it thinking, yeah, this is good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. But if you've never sat down and looked at what life could look like in the future and what costs can be in the future and the potential increase in cost of living,
Yeah.
plus taxes, which we can't
Mm.
control, right? All of those things. So you need to be having conversations to prepare for things that may never happen.
Yeah.
That's where you can truly sit back and feel like I've got this.
Yeah. Yeah. There was, I think you're aware of this. There was an exercise that my husband and I did a couple years ago. Um, well, many years ago now, after my parents passed and we had to deal with the estate and all of that.
Mhm.
And it's to help you find that number. And I might say this wrong. So, forgive me, Natalie, you can help me with the language, but it's basically figuring out the annual salary that you want to draw down from your investments. And then I think then your investments are like 24% of whatever that number is. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. So it's called your
I'm not
financial.
explaining it well.
You're good, you're good. It's called your financial independence number. What that if
Yes.
you don't know what that is, you need to instantly realize it's time for me to have a conversation. And here's why. Your financial independence number is going to tell you if you want to retire at age 65, the average life expectancy in America is 85 years old. Okay? So if you retire at 65, you live till 85 and you want $100,000 worth of income every single year, okay, 100,000 times that 20 years, that's what you need to have. But then it needs to
Mhm.
be adjusted for cost of living increases, potential
Right.
tax increases. And here is the thing that most people do. And I think I will say this right off the bat, high net worth individuals, I think have an easier time dreaming bigger
Yes.
or thinking of retirement being something grander than just living and not working.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I do think by nature that exists for them. And the reason I say that is a lot of times I'll sit down with people and I'll say, what do you want life to look like in retirement? How much money do you want coming in? Well, let's see. I need $5,000 a month. That would cover everything. How much do you want? right? But
Yeah.
but let's be honest. Society pushes us to spend,
Mhm.
pushes us to go into debt. All of the things, right? It's all a corporation. It's all a business, right? All
Right.
these companies are out there making money. So everything looks shiny and pretty and exciting. Nobody's out there pushing constantly commercials about saving, investing. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if the other happens? Those are
Mhm.
not commonplace if they exist at all. And so, even when we have high net worth, we may think I'm good. Again, you're comfortable, you're overconfident in that income and where you're saving because of that, you've never sat down and had a full conversation and taken a full look at it. And I'll
Mhm.
give you one quick example. I have a dear, dear friend, single, never been married, just turned 50 years old last year, has a cute little house. She is not a traveler. She travels like twice a year. She is a high anxiety traveler. Her dream is not to travel in retirement. Her dream is to have her house paid off. She turned one of the bedrooms into her house into a floor to ceiling library. She loves doing puzzles. She loves reading books.
I love
That
that.
that is the dream for her, to have her house paid off, to be in a safe place, and to be able to do the things she loves most.
Yeah.
Her FIN number was a little over $800,000. Now, when I told her what it was, she about fell off her chair. She's like,
That's
"No."
so low though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, she's a decent income earner, but she's like, "I don't need a lot. My house will be paid off, all of this. I don't want for a lot. My wants are to be able to buy the books, to do the puzzles, and just live a a slow and happy life." That's her
Mhm.
dream. Now, let me give you my example. Also single. I do have one grown son. My FIN number is $3.8 million because I want investment properties, because I want to travel the world in retirement, and I only want to fly first class. If I am flying to Europe for the first time in my life, I am laying in one of those first class beds with the all the things and free pajamas.
Yep.
Okay? That's me. And I want to give back to causes that are important to me. I want to give
Mhm.
back to my church. So for me, all of those components are built in there. That's the difference from person to person. This conversation is so important because it needs to be personalized. You don't fit into a box. Your future doesn't fit into a box, and your dreams should not be forced
Yeah.
to fit into a box. So a lot of times people will like, well, that's all I need. I know I'm going to be okay with that. Okay, but
Mhm.
what do you want? My big want, and here's how I get people to dream. I'm like, okay. I don't want to just hear that you want to travel. Like, where do you want to go? What is that trip going to look like? Are you flying first class? Are you
Mhm.
staying in a little casita over the ocean? My crazy audacious thing is a 1963 split window fastback Corvette fully restored. That does not have a small price tag on it. And it might be one of the last things I get on my list because it's definitely not a priority. And I may not get it till I'm 80 or 85, and my 60-year-old son at that point might be driving me around in it. But that is my big audacious thing. Those
Mhm.
are the things I want people to take away from listening to this podcast and think, I need to dream bigger later in life. Why are you
Yeah.
spending 40, 50 years of your life working your butt off to create whatever success looks like for you to live less
Mhm.
than in retirement? No, you should be working that 40, 50 years of your life so that you can live your biggest and best life when you're no longer working. That's my honest opinion. We're not here for all these years to settle for the last 20
Yeah.
years of our life.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Natalie, this is such an important conversation. And I know that some people listening to this will be like, that'll never be me. I will never get there. I will never da, 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 da. Honestly, this entire conversation starts with you changing that narrative. If you don't think that you are going to get there, then you're not going to get there. And when you start to focus on it, your decisions change.
Yeah.
How you manage your money changes. Everything changes. And I can tell you my my financial advisor, who, funny enough, was my parents' financial advisor and my grandpa's financial
I love
advisor.
that.
So he's been around for a minute. We were talking about this, and he talked about how he had seen so many younger people blow through money that they received, because they did not have the education, they didn't have the goals, they didn't have any of this mindset around the future and what they needed to be comfortable. And they just blew through everything. And I remember him saying to my husband and I, you guys are some of the best, like, mental, emotional, sound
Yeah.
decisions around money that I have seen in my clients, and I thought that was great.
Yeah, it
I
is.
took a lot of pride in that because I was like, well, first of all, my parents died, and that sucks, and I don't want to waste whatever opportunity that they have given us to live a different or better life. And we had to completely change how we viewed money.
Mhm.
And so for anybody listening to this, whether you are that, high net worth earner trying to figure this out, or you're not quite there yet, but you want to get there, it starts with that mindset shift of, this is where I want to be. Because some of those numbers, those fire numbers, like those independent numbers, they do sound scary because they are so big. But if you
Mhm.
understand the market, if you understand investing, and you understand the decisions, then you can absolutely get there. It does take time, and it does take strategy, but you can get there. But you have to start with how you are processing around money.
Yeah. You absolutely have to. That's where the financial education comes in. Okay, so this brings up, like, the last point I made before. Why are you spending 40 or 50 years of life working to live less than in retirement? You should be living less than now.
Yeah.
And I don't mean less than like at the poverty level. Good grief. If you're making really great money, you should have some of the things you want.
Right.
You should have the fun. You should be making some of your own dreams come true, but you should be limiting yourself now while you can work so that you can live your best life later, whatever that
Mhm.
best life looks like for you. And your definition of success is the only one that matters. Stop
Yes.
trying to keep up with everybody else. Stop trying to compete with what they have or where like, what does that look like for you? What is
Yeah.
your dream? And that is the conversation I have with every client. The first time I sit down with them, it's all based on education and getting to know one another and make sure, hey, am I the right person for you? And are you the right client for me?
Right.
And from there, it's let's look at all your numbers. Where is everything? Right now, while you're working, every dollar you have should have a job. This
Mhm.
dollar goes into savings. This dollar is a family vacation. This dollar is a Christmas fund. Every dollar should have a job. And there's a U account. There's the fun money. There should
Mhm.
be a portion of your money that has that job too. Okay. And when you have the financial education, you break things down in that detail exactly to what you're saying, Julia, you start thinking differently about money. You
Mhm.
absolutely do. And when you have had what you've experienced in losing your parents, me in caretaking for my parents, it gives you a different perspective too.
Yes.
And that's where that
Yeah.
time frame, my ideal client is 45 to 65 years old. Why? Because about 45 years old is the time where, like, hey, what does retirement really look like for me? I probably should figure that out.
Mhm.
And also, they're still taking care of kids in the home or maybe still supporting kids that are in college, starting adulthood, and they have elderly loved ones that in some way, shape, or form are supporting, are loving on, are showing up for. And so that's the sandwich generation, right? We're stuck
Yeah.
right there in the middle of everything. And those things on both ends make us start thinking, what does the future look like for me? And so it's poor planning, misaligned priorities, and overexposure to risk are three of the biggest things that can
Mhm.
amplify concerns for the future. And so I always talk to people about diversity. Set up your retirement foundation first so you know that that minimum you need is going to be there. It's protected, it's growing, and there are ways to do that where it grows comparative to the market and you're not going to lose anything. And also have that emergency fund in a bank, save for those vacations in your bank, things like that, if that's what you want
Mhm.
to do, and then take advantage of the market where you can. But another reason I said before, if the only place you're saving is your 401k, you should be concerned. Here's why. In 2008, there were a lot of people planning to retire in the next year or two, and the market dropped 40%, and all their money was in that 401k.
Yep.
Guess who didn't retire in the next 2 years or still retired and cut what life looked like in half for
Mhm.
themselves in retirement? So it's having diversity in your portfolio, asking yourself the question, where am I saving my money? How much of it do I want protected? And if I have my baseline, then I can go ahead and look for those opportunity to capture that bigger growth that's in the market and stuff.
Yeah.
So just balance that out. Make sure you're touching all those places. The best time to start is when you get that first big girl or big boy job, right? The next best time to start is today. And for
Yeah.
those people who feel like they're behind, the one last point I want to make on this topic is the next best time to start is today. And people are closer than they think.
Mhm.
In that second appointment I have where I'm gathering numbers, I don't make any recommendations at that point. But as I'm gathering somebody's numbers, I know whether or not I'm going to be able to surprise them
Yeah.
at how close they actually are to making those dreams happen just
Mhm.
by making a couple of adjustments to where their money is, maybe
Yeah.
increasing savings a little bit or using a tool they didn't know was available to them. And so
Yes.
don't panic is the
Yeah.
point. Don't panic. Have the don't I used to tell myself, it's probably gonna cost me 50 to $100 an hour to get somebody to help me. They probably want me to have $250,000 or at least 100,000. I've been a single mom for 13 years at that point in my mid 40s. So I don't have any of those things. I'm just gonna keep going. And then I
Mhm.
tripped across what I do now, and I found out that that doesn't have to be the case. My clients do not pay me directly for my services ever. Now, there are advisors that you do pay, and there's reasons for that. So I'm not saying one is better than the other, but if you're just starting out to have a conversation, there are financial professionals out there like myself who can help you get started without taking everything you have every month that you could be saving.
Yeah.
So just be strategic. But the
Yeah.
best thing you could do is have that conversation as soon as possible, figure out where you are on the scale of getting from where you are today to where you wanna be in the future, and do you have the protection for the unknowns of life? And
Yeah.
then just start taking those steps on repeat,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you'll still get where you wanna be. It's absolutely possible.
Yeah. I love that so much, and I think one of the things that I don't think people think about, and I'm sharing this because you and I have gone through this, and we bring up caregiving because this is an area where Natalie and I have such a similar story,
Mhm.
and I am gonna tell you as somebody that had to go through the costs of caregiving, you have no idea how much money it truly takes to take care of another human. Whether you choose to outsource that care, which is what I did, or whether you invite them into your home, which is what Natalie's doing,
Mhm.
there are still so many costs and the amount of money that it takes if you have to put them into some kind of like, medical facility type situation, depending on like, there are so many unknowns and the cost of that is obscene.
Yeah.
And so for those of you who are in a better financial position or your family is in a better financial position, you're not going to get the same Medi-Cal, is it Medi-Cal for older?
Medicaid.
Medicaid.
Mhm.
You're not gonna get the same Medicaid support that somebody else would that doesn't have some of those investments and things like that, and so this is why this is part of why I wanted to have this conversation, because there are people who think, oh, well, this insurance will pay for this, or this insurance will pay. Sometimes, yes, if you have the right insurances, but not always, or it's a very specific scenario. It's a very specific situation. And
Mhm.
now you're stuck trying to figure out your parents' financial situation and your financial situation,
Yes.
or having to supplement, like, and I think our whole point here is you don't know what's going to happen. And this
Mhm.
isn't like a doom or gloom conversation, but you need to have some preparation if this
Yeah.
is not something that you have thought about. Because until you're in it, you don't know how you're going to make decisions, and you don't know how you're going to be impacted by what's happening to you. So
Yeah.
when, like, for me, my dad passed unexpectedly, and then I had to be a caregiver for my mom. I had to watch her decline, and I had to make decisions for her. I had to make medical decisions, I had to make financial decisions, all while watching my mom die, and my dad had just died. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain to people the mental and emotional toll that has, and then to sit back and be like, I have to make these big financial decisions that I've never had to make before for somebody else,
Yeah.
and I think that's kind of part of why we're so passionate about this, because we've lived in that, oh shoot, I need to get things in order. And I think that experience is why when my mom passed and we had to deal with her estate, I was like, well, I'm not squandering this, because I just saw
Yep.
what could happen, and I saw how much it costs, and I saw all of these things, and I was like, I will not leave that burden for my child
Yep.
to have to deal with. And thankfully my parents really didn't leave that burden, but I still you don't know what you don't know
Yeah.
until you're in the middle of having to make those decisions, right?
Yeah. And I think another point on that too is if your parents didn't properly prepare, what are you going to do? You're not just going to set them on the side of the road and let them wither away. You're going to spend the money you have saved to care for them. So then what
Mhm.
about your retirement, right? And I run into that a lot of the time. It's very sad. Here's what I want to go over a couple of things since you touched on cost. The average caretaker in their home, hands-on caretaker like myself, is still spending about $7,200 a year to care for
Mhm.
their person, whether it's
Yeah.
buying equipment you need, buying supplies, if they're incontinent, whatever that looks like, co-payments, etc. About $7,200 a year. My mom was in the hospital the week before Christmas. And of course, I was getting pressured from the doctors to put her in a home. And then when I said no to that, they're like, well, you should hire caretakers. And I work from home. I'm able to build my own schedule. So I'm like, I need to get her home and see what this looks like now with this new decline before I make any of those decisions. But what I
Mhm.
did do is start making phone calls. I'm in North Texas. Here, it's going to be anywhere from $5,800 to about $10,000 a month for a private room in a care facility, depending on the level of care that she needs.
Yep.
Okay. All right. That, kind of falls into the realm of what I'd always understood as a financial professional. But then when I sat down to talk to a caretaking company that places caretakers in your home, and now there are less expensive ways to do this. If you go directly to caretakers and hire them directly, you don't have those service fees.
Mhm.
But just giving a quick example, I went from $5,000 to $10,000 a month, thinking, okay, well, if I brought some support care into the home, it's probably less expensive than that. 16 hours a day for 1 week is $5,100 per week. That's $20,000 a month
Yeah.
for only 16 hours a day of support caregiving. Those are the things we're talking about. Those are the numbers you need to think about for your loved ones that you may have responsibility for. And so I
Mhm.
challenge people too to please have those hard conversations with your loved ones and find out what they have in place so you know what you could potentially have dropped in your lap in those situations, as well as planning for your own. The other thing I will say is long-term care is great, but you have to be in you have to not be able to do 2 of the 6 activities of daily living. So being able to get yourself dressed, feed yourself, things like that before
Mhm.
those benefits kick in. What I'm going to recommend is you talk to somebody about living benefits, chronic, critical, and terminal illness, as well as critical injury. If you become disabled, if you're diagnosed with cancer and you're given a time limit, if you're diagnosed with cancer and it's maybe 2 to 5 years, that's going to be critical instead of terminal. But in those situations, these benefits come attached to your life insurance policies.
Mhm.
Here's how it benefits you either way. It's not a standalone long-term care policy that you pay for and never use, and so that money's just gone. One, you can attach long-term care to life insurance policies as well, but living benefits are the new thing. They're so much more versatile. You can use them, say you're in your 50s and you're in a car accident or you go through a cancer diagnosis and you can't work for a few months and everything turns out well, but you're still able to tap those benefits to fill in those financial gaps so you're not
Mhm.
draining retirement. The other thing that's great about these is because they're attached to life insurance, if you don't have to use them when you're living, they still pass on to your beneficiaries. They're still a part of
Mhm.
your legacy you leave behind. So you haven't flushed that money down the toilet. You've put that protection in place. If you need it while you're alive, you tap into those benefits and you don't have to touch your retirement. So you continue to live in a retirement the way that you planned.
Yeah.
If you don't need them, again, they're part of your legacy. And so that is part of the education, the conversations
Yeah.
to be having with whoever your financial professional is so that you can tick all those boxes because it's a game changer to not be carrying that weight.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I want to take a step back because I feel like, I mean, you and I, we talked about caregiving. This is going to be a given in this episode
Yeah, yeah,
because so many people don't realize. But I do want to take a step back and talk a little bit more practically
yeah.
for people. So if somebody's paycheck stopped tomorrow, whether that's a layoff or something happens, what should they have in place financially? And I know that there is like everybody's different and all of that,
Mhm.
but if you had to answer that more generally as something for people to, do a little more research into, what should they have outside of a paycheck and a 401k?
An emergency fund. An
Mm,
emergency fund with a minimum of 3 months income saved into it. If you're a dual income household, I would say start with 3 months and build it to 6 months because I know some dual income households where they both lost jobs at the same time. So you
yeah.
can't count on that other job's going to be there and that's enough to cover the bills or the bare necessities, right? 3 to 6 months minimum if you're a 2 income household, 6 to 12 months minimum if you're a single income household. And that comes from somebody who lived it. In the middle of my career after 2008, I went through 3 layoffs in 4 years. None of them were my fault. They were restructuring of companies with the impact of 2008 flowing through over time. It doesn't all happen overnight. And so
Mhm.
I was at a point mid-career where I took a $15 an hour temp job to keep the rent paid and food on the table. And I rebuilt myself to 7 figures, or not 7 figures, I wish. 6 figures
Six years.
in about a year's time. Okay, but it was a process and it was what I had to do at the time. In between all of those, I had my 3-month emergency fund, but I was at an executive level. Those jobs aren't just sitting there. Those jobs typically take between 3 and 6 months to find, especially if you want one that is the right fit for you.
Mhm.
Financial freedom gives you the ability to find the right job, not just
Yes.
step into any job. And so I drained my savings. I leaned on my credit cards. I found the job. I paid off the credit cards. I built back up my savings. But I went through that 3 times in 4 years. It's horrible.
Mm,
All you ever think about is the financial stress. And I didn't get to always think, is this the absolute best job for me? Is there something different I would want to do? What are my options? My option was I got to pay the rent. I got to make sure that my 9-year-old son is eating, right?
right. Right.
So that emergency fund is imperative. You need to look at Now, your emergency fund should be able to cover all of your bills, your minimum bills. You can cancel the subscriptions for a few months. You can go without eating out. Those things are simple to cut back. But that emergency fund is a game changer in giving you room to breathe when you're navigating difficult situations without having the financial burden on your shoulders as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I honestly, I would adjust that. I've been telling my clients, you really need to have the 9 to 12
Mhm.
for most people right now because of how this market is. I'm watching very talented professionals not be able to find positions, and most of them are not being very particular right now. They're just trying to get in
Yeah.
where they can, and so I would agree with you. I think that emergency fund is huge. Like, that's a huge benefit to anyone. And I find too, a lot of my clients who are higher net worth, they have that.
Mhm.
They've had that established, and so they have been able to leave toxic positions. They've been able to make different decisions because they know that they have some cushion there. So I can say from experience, like, I think that's the number one thing. And I shouldn't say it's easy. It's an easier win
Yeah.
for you where you don't necessarily have to go into like, well, what life insurance? What about this? What about this investment? What about that? Those are bigger decisions that, do require a different level of education for you. And so I think that's such a really good practical start for the majority of people. I want to touch on something that we have skirted around a little bit, but I want to make sure that we get into this episode because I think it's going to impact a lot of people, and that is the wealth transfer that is
Mm.
slated to happen over the next probably 10, 15 years or so. And we're starting to see a little bit of it. I think COVID kick-started some of that, unfortunately. But I want to talk about the wealth transfer for the reason that I talked about earlier in the episode of my financial advisor who praised us for not blowing through all the money. And I'd love to get your opinion on this. And I don't know if you've had any clients that have had to deal with this, but there are so many nuances to inheritance getting passed down and how to set things up and what that looks like. And I'm not saying we have to go into all of that because there's a lot of, accounting and lawyering and things like that. But I would just love to know your opinion on the wealth transfer and kind of what I would say older millennials and Gen X, younger Gen X generations need to think about when it comes to this coming down the pike, basically.
Yeah, I think the one thing you need to think about is a financial education. If you can't sit there and say, "Hey, if I were to come into a bunch of money, I know where I would put it," then you need to get a financial education because that is going to start happening for a lot of people. And I think it's going to happen for a lot of people that don't know it's coming because the generations that are about to pass that money on were generations that didn't talk a lot about money. They didn't talk
Mhm.
about how much they had or how it was structured or who was getting it. And so if you are not prepared to think about it like this, the majority of lottery winners are bankrupt within 2
Okay.
to 5 years because they don't know what to do with the money. They have this influx of money and it's like, "Oh, I can get this, get this." Well, even if you paid cash for a house, your dream house, guess what? You don't have a mortgage, but there's a whole lot of expenses that go into keeping up that
Mhm.
house and the taxes, the
Taxes.
insurance on it, right?
Yeah.
All of the things. And in today's day and age, like homeowners associations, depending on where you live, there's all of those components that come into it. So
Mhm.
let me break this down. Initially, they said the great wealth transfer was going to be about $84 trillion by the year 2030. Now they're saying through the year 2045, it's projected to be 124 million. Or I'm sorry, not million, trillion.
Billion. Oh,
Trillion with the
trillion.
T. Yes. So initially they were
Trillion.
saying 84 trillion. through 2045. Now they're saying $124 trillion will transfer hands from generation to generation by 2048. And ladies, hear me, you're getting the majority of it. Women are going to be getting the majority of it. There are more women than there are men in this world. So that's a big part of it. Okay. Millennials projected to inherit around 46 trillion of that. Gen X, about 39 trillion, and Gen Z, about 15 trillion. Now, here's something else. If you think about those three numbers, what does that tell you? Our boomers were good savers. They're passing that 39 trillion to Gen X. Gen X is then passing to millennials, but millennials and Gen Z, going to Gen Z, it's dropping more.
Right.
I will say one of the things that I love seeing is Gen Z is passionate about saving and understanding money like the previous 2 or 3 generations have not been. And look, part of it comes from boomers were typically single income houses. I'm a Gen Xer. My generation is the one that the norm was 2 income households. But because we had 2 incomes, we spent 2 incomes. Instead of, hey, we have 2 incomes, let's live on this one and save this one, right? So it's that mentality, those habits, that financial education comes into it. But knowing where you would put it, if and when it shows up, is imperative to making sure it's going to last. And if you want to, like you said, Julia, for you, you're like, I'm not going to squander what my parents worked so hard to leave behind. I'm going to make sure it carries forward. If you want to do that, not just having a financial education, but setting up the ultimate protection and making sure you have a trust in place. My son will be set if something happens to me, but my son is getting it in lump sums over a 20-year period of time to help with that responsibility.
Yeah.
Because my ultimate dream is that every generation after me always knows they have a roof over their head and food on the table.
Yeah. Agreed.
Right? So whatever that is for you plays into that. But that wealth transfer is going to be a game changer if it's managed correctly.
Yeah.
And it's going to leave people destitute if it's not.
Yeah. And I think, kind of tying up this whole conversation, starting that now for yourself before you have to deal with the previous generations and whatever their choices are going to be, you have a different level of education around money. My parents started me very young, like high school, understanding investments, understanding the stock market, understanding how to save, how to make all of those choices. So that's always something that has been with me, and that's just evolved and grown over the years. And I know that that's unusual, but I feel like right now, especially, I'm an elder millennial, so I'm just a little younger, but we didn't always get that. My generation didn't always get that. And now from a career perspective, we're also seeing we're going to have to work. Right? Like we're going to have to work until we die, basically. Right? Unless you do benefit from the wealth transfer. But if we're struggling so much now, then it's going to be hard to accept that wealth transfer and not blow through it.
Yep.
And so I think the whole point of this episode is really like figure out where you're at, get the education that you need, find the right people. And I can tell you too, talking finances is hard. Finding somebody that you trust is harder. There's a reason that I stayed with the financial advisor that my family has had for literally generations at this point.
Yeah.
And they're, priming me to stay with other people in the office and things like that. Like, there's a reason for that because they know I trust them. We've made a lot of big decisions together. They were with me when my parents were dying and I had to make these decisions, and they called and cried on the phone with me. Right. And this sounds so crazy if you're not somebody that's had to deal with it. But to trust people to help you make financial decisions is so huge.
Yeah.
And I will say one of the things that I appreciate about Natalie, and Natalie and I have had different financial conversations as well. One of the things that I appreciate is you will never push anybody to make any decision.
Right.
And you guys know, listening, I'm like that as a career coach. Like, I'm not going to push you to buy from me. I'm not going to push you to do, like, you have to figure out what's right for you. And I feel like, Natalie, you come with that same spirit of, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's see if I'm the best fit and if we're going to work well together. And I've never known you to push anything. And I so appreciate that about your approach. And this isn't like I don't get anything from, from this episode.
I'm not paying her.
Yeah, she's not paying me, but that's part of why I brought Natalie on, because I know her, I know her heart, I know how she runs her business, and it's so similar to mine in how we work with clients, that I wanted to come and have a perspective of somebody that understands what's out there and what's possible and can really help you make the best decisions for your unique situation.
Yeah. And I appreciate you saying that, Julia. That's one of my big areas of focus. The only thing I'm ever going to push people to do, and I will push hard on this, and I will not apologize for it, is get a financial education and sit down with somebody.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be your neighbor, whoever. Sit down with somebody and keep sitting down until you feel like I can trust this person.
Yeah.
You're the client. You're the one hiring them to help you with your financial future. It should be on your terms. You're interviewing them. So if anything does not feel comfortable, go to somebody else. I'm going to give you permission to do that. The other thing is, if you sit down with a financial advisor, financial professional, financial coach, whatever you want to call them, and you do not get a financial education, and they are not answering your questions, and they are telling you what you should do or pressuring you to sign something, you need to go somewhere else. 100%. If you need help finding somebody, I would be happy to help make recommendations based on what you're looking for. I don't do every aspect of financial planning. I'm very good at what I do, but I have very good trusted partners that do the pieces I don't. All of that to say, my job, and I tell every client this, my job is to educate you. My job is to understand where you're currently at and where you want to get to, and then show you options to make that happen. Your job is to make a decision about where you're going to go.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. I'm never going to tell a client what they should do. I'm going to show a client what's possible for them to reach the goals they have for their future. And then I'm going to answer whatever questions they have so they can make a confident, educated decision about that. And that's what's really important.
Yeah. I love that. Oh, what an episode, Natalie. This was so great. How can people work with you?
People can reach out to me, email Natalie at nataliekimeconsulting.com, and you can find me on all the socials. I'm on LinkedIn under Natalie McPhee Kime, Facebook and Instagram, Natalie McPhee Kime. It's pretty steady. I am currently getting ready to build out a school platform where there's a lot of resources too. So when I get that ready, Julia, I'll have you share that with your people. But yeah, I'm on the socials. I'm out there, and I would love to have a conversation with anybody that needs it.
Oh, I love that. And I will put all of Natalie's contact information in the blog post for this episode. And when that school comes live, we'll add that into this blog post as well. But if this episode resonated with you, please subscribe so that you don't miss future episodes, and share this episode with someone that you think would benefit from this information, which at this point is probably everybody. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, you control your career.